So today I'm going to be talking about 5 books that I've read so far during the month of August. So stick around to see what they are. Hey friends, Roger here. So today I'm doing my August mid-month wrap-up. That is to say the first of the books that I've read during the first part of August. And I've read 5 books thus far. So I'm pretty much on track with my TBR. So the first book that I read was entitled You Go Bernadette by Maria Semple. I didn't read this when I listened to this one in an audiobook. So You Go Bernadette is a satire told in epistolary format and revolves around antisocial Bernadette Fox, a former genius-level architect who appears to be agoraphobic, impulsive, and suffers from severe social anxiety. There's also her mostly absent husband, LG, who is an executive computer engineer at Microsoft, and their 15-year-old daughter, B, who has overcome a congenital heart condition and is now a straight-A student at a progressive charter school. Now, Bernadette does not get along with the other mothers at school. In fact, she refers to them all as gnats. And she's also in a bitter battle with the next-door neighbor, Audrey Griffin, who definitely has it out for Bernadette. So when her daughter B states that she wants a trip to Antarctica as the promised reward for getting perfect grades, Bernadette freaks out. Just the idea of the trip sends her into this spiraling anxiety. She begins to have sort of a breakdown. So then everything pretty much comes crashing down to Bernadette, especially after her rivalry with Audrey Griffin escalates, resulting in a mudslide. Yes, you heard me correctly, a mudslide. So after a failed intervention by her husband, Bernadette disappears without a trace. So now it's up to her daughter to figure out what happened to her mother. And that's what she does by putting together a gigantic compilation of a complex series of emails, voicemails, school memos, doctor bills, newspaper articles, and even doctor reports, all of which reveal Bernadette's backstory and secret past, of which most people were unaware. And of course, I won't spoil what that secret is. So it's through all of these devices that B tells her mother's story. So this novel really ended up being a fun and entertaining satire on wealth and privilege, with many of the characters being really self-deluded and clueless, resulting in some quite over-the-top hysterical scenes. There were also quite a few surprising plot twists in this story, and everything just came together beautifully at the end. You know, this was such a humorous and inventive novel, and I thought that it was absolutely brilliant. And I found myself chuckling out loud several times while working my way through the story. I also appreciate that one of the themes of the story points out to what can happen to our mental state if we suppress our inner talents and instead simply choose to settle. So all in all, I love this wacky novel. And if you can appreciate satire with plenty of dark humor and maybe are willing to suspend disbelief a little, then this novel is definitely well worth a read. So the next book that I read is entitled Fan Art by Sarah Treguet. I got this book from the library, so I don't have a physical copy, but I'll put the book cover up above. So Fan Art is a contemporary romance that follows high school senior Jamie Peterson, I do believe. Or was it Patterson? I don't remember. I think it was Jamie Peterson. So he's gay and he's out to his parents, but he is not out at school and he is not out to his best friend Mason. So yes, so it's still a secret to everybody at school, or so Jamie thinks. So one day Jamie has a shocking realization that he's fallen in love with his best friend Mason. So he's hesitant to tell supposedly straight Mason that he's gay, and he certainly doesn't want to tell him that he's in love with him, as he doesn't want things to become awkward between them and jeopardize his friendship. Essentially, he doesn't want to lose Mason. So this is an important theme in the story, as friendship seems to be the driving force of the plot. So Jamie also clashes with his fellow editors of a school magazine, which is called The Gumshoe, which I think is a great name for a school magazine. When the other editors refuse to publish a comic depicting two gay characters. So here Jimmy has to kind of decide whether to stand up for what he believes in and then risk Mason discovering that he's gay in the process, or keeping quiet. So what we have here then is kind of a journey as Jamie faces his fears and finally embraces who he is. So the social justice element of this really resonated with me as Jamie attempts to convince his cohorts of the magazine that everyone has a right to be equally represented in the school's paper. So in spite of Jamie's best efforts to hide his sexuality, pretty much everybody at the school already knows that Jamie's gay, and they know where his affections lie. So then there's a group of fangirls who are determined to get Jamie and Mason together, unbeknownst to the both of them. So though the girls have good intentions, they end up ignoring Jamie's personal feelings on the matter when deciding to take matters into their own hands, and end up pushing Jamie into a situation for which he was neither comfortable nor ready. So this is one aspect of the book that I found troubling. I never liked the whole forced outing thing. And also the manner in which Jamie talked about and related to women, that was troublesome for me. And the disgust that he felt when talking about kissing a girl felt way over the top, unrealistic and insulting. So yeah, I found that a little bit problematic in the novel. Now, one aspect of the story that I did find particularly endearing was the backstory of a classmate who passed away in a car accident. So after his death, the victim's friends began using the term "I love you, man" with each other as a way to express friendship and as a way to allow the young men to express their love to their friends and recognize the importance of their friends in their lives. So I found this aspect of the story to be quite moving. So though it has a few problems, fan art is overall a light, fluffy summer contemporary with adorable characters, a good amount of teen angst, and a super sweet fairy tale ending. So the next book that I read thus far this month is entitled The Whisper Man, written by Alex North. Now I've already talked about this book on this channel a few times, so I won't go into too much detail. I actually did a full-on book chat review of this book, and I'll put the link up above, so the card up above, so you can watch it if you like. So the story takes place in the town of Featherback, which has quite a gruesome past, because 20 years ago, a serial killer dubbed the Whisper Man murdered 5 young boys. So he was eventually caught and is now locked up in prison. So then we move to the present day, and another little boy has gone missing. So what's troubling is that the crime bears a shocking resemblance to the Whisper Man's crimes of 20 years ago. So the detective who arrested the Whisper Man, Peter Willis, has always suspected that the murderer may have had an accomplice but could never prove anything or gather any concrete evidence for it. So now Willis can't help but wonder whether the old crimes and this new crime are related. Now, the story also revolves around a man named Tom Kennedy, a grieving widower, and his 7-year-old son Jake, who recently moved into town and into a new house. So Jake, the son, the boy, begins to act up and claims to hear whispering outside of his window.
What's Megan?
Oh, and Jake also has an imaginary friend who tells him details about the Whisper Man that only the police could know. So so that aspect was very interesting. So what's interesting about this story is that it's told from the point of view of several of the characters in the book, from Pete the detective, another detective, Amanda Beck, Jake, and Tom, Jake's father. So in being privy to their thoughts, we can't help but experience and be moved by the intense human element in this story, especially in regards to the troublesome and dysfunctional relationships between fathers and their sons. So I thought that all these different perspectives on the events in Featherback really added an extra depth to the story, creating a generally well-rounded tale. Now, I will say that this book is eerie and downright terrifying, but it isn't graphic or gory, for which I was grateful, given that the victims in the story are all children. Now, that's not to say it isn't terrifying. It is. It's an intense, heart-in-your-throat psychological thriller with a huge creep factor. I mean, just the situation of abducted children by a potential serial killer is more than enough to create an unbelievable amount of tension and get the heart pounding. I thought it was dark, twisty, and it fills you with an ever sense of menace as you turn each page and the story progresses. So, and the villain in the story, utterly chilling. I mean, this is the kind of dude that gives you nightmares and has you double-checking and triple-checking the locks on your doors and windows at night. So I've already mentioned in a past video that this might be one of my favorite books of this year. It definitely is one of the top ones, and of course I gave this book 5 stars. So the next book that I read this month was entitled Gods of Jade and Shadow, written by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. So this is a standalone fantasy story that takes place during the Jazz Age in the Roaring 20s, and it follows a young woman named Cassiopeia Tun who lives in Yucatan, Mexico. So she and her mother are pretty much considered the poor relations and are servants, pretty much spending their days slaving away for their wealthy and tyrannical grandfather. So one day, Cassiopeia discovers that her grandfather has left the key for a strange wooden trunk in his room, a trunk that's always remained locked. So unable to resist her curiosity, she opens the chest and inadvertently releases the Mayan god of death, Hun Kame, who was apparently imprisoned in the trunk. So yeah, you got me at Mayan god of death. So apparently, Hun Kame is the dethroned lord of his realm, and his twin brother, Vakub Kame, in an act of treachery, trapped him in the trunk and stole his kingdom, which is the Mayan version of the underworld, which is called Xibalba in this story, which is basically the land of death. So Hun Kame is the rightful king and supreme lord of Xibalba and requests Cassiopeia's help in getting back his throne. Well, I shouldn't say request, actually. As it turns out, she doesn't have much choice in the matter. But I shan't say more on that. So what follows is a harrowing journey as Cassiopeia, along with the handsome yet commanding death god, headed to Mexico City and subsequently into the dark underworld, and along the way encounter all manners of gods, demons, and creatures. So I thought the world building in this book was phenomenal. The vibrant world that the author created here is magical, it's twisty, it's dark, dangerous, and utterly compelling. So the detail that went into the storytelling really brought it to life, at least it did for me. I loved Cassiopeia's character and felt that she's an exquisite heroine. She's feisty, brave, defiant, proud, and refuses to take crap from anyone, even from death himself. And I found myself falling in love with her more and more as the story progressed. So yeah, I thought this was an inventive and addictive story that was elegantly written and well constructed with an evocative and gripping plot that I found absolutely fascinating. You know, the author managed to seamlessly blend in the real and mythic in a way that was a joy to read. I really loved the otherworldly aspect to this tale and found it utterly enchanting. The blending of the old Mayan myths, legends, and gods with the new lifestyle of the 1920s really worked well for me. There's also plenty of character growth in this story, which I appreciated. So yeah, thought that Gods of Jade and Shadow is incredibly imaginative with vivid descriptions, a truly magical plot, and a vast array of exciting and complex characters. And I gave this one 5 stars as well. And I'll probably do a full-on review of it in the coming days. So the last book that I worked my way through this month was entitled The Bride Test, written by Helen Huang. And I actually listened to this one in an audiobook, and the narrator was great. So The Bride Test is the sequel to The Kiss Quotient, a novel that I really loved. And they both are standalones and can be read independently of the other. But this story follows Michael's handsome cousin Kai, a young accountant. So Michael is one of the main characters from The Kiss Quotient, so this book is about his cousin. So I've been anticipating The Bride Test ever since I finished the first novel, and I'm happy to say it did not disappoint. So Kai is autistic, and because of an event from his childhood, he believes himself to be utterly stone-hearted. That is to say, he has no feelings, or he believes he has no feelings besides perhaps annoyance and irritation, and is incapable of loving anyone. So because of this, he's pretty much resigned himself to spend the rest of his life alone, without romance, without love. So thus he steadfastly avoids relationships and lives pretty much a simple life alone in his 2-bedroom house. But his mother, she has her own ideas and decides to take the matter into her own hands. So what she does is goes to Vietnam to find Kai the perfect bride. She returns with a young woman named May Tran, who has changed her name to Esme when coming to the States. And she's a poor young woman with a little daughter at home, a fact which she neglects to mention to Kai's mom. So Esme works really hard as a cleaning woman, supporting her mother, grandmother, and her daughter. So when Kai's mother approaches her with the opportunity of marrying her son Kai and being able to move her family, Esme's family, to the United States, Esme can't turn it down, because this might be her family's one chance to escape poverty. So she arrives in the United States, and she has until the end of summer to win Kai's heart, or else it's back to Vietnam. Now, what she didn't count on was herself falling in love with Kai, a man who has convinced himself that he can never return her affection. And of course, there's the whole secret of Esme's daughter back in Vietnam, a secret which has to come out at some point. Now, so as other opportunities become available to Esme here, she decides that she does not want a marriage of convenience with Kai after all, because she's in love with him. She wants a true marriage. That means Kai needs to love her as much as she loves him, and therein lies the problem. So what I liked about Kai's character in this book was that he wasn't just simply a male version of Stella, the autistic woman from the first book. He's very much a different person. And as we see in this book, ASD affects him quite differently than Stella. I also loved how wonderfully understanding and accepting Esme is of Kai's needs and boundaries, which really made her character shine for me in this story. Now, this book didn't have quite as much sex as the first book, but there is a good amount of steam, so beware if you're prudish about nookie in your novels. I did, however, find the love scenes to be tastefully done, and they really added a depth to the story. The romance was perfect, I thought, and it was very slow burn, which is one of my favorite tropes, which I've mentioned a time or two on this channel. So all in all, the story was a delight to read, and succeeded in putting a silly smile on my face several times as I worked my way through it, and maybe even shed a tear or two. So once again, I love the autism representation in this book, and found it both refreshing and informative, and appreciated that at the end of the day, the story teaches us that being autistic does not mean you're broken. It just means that your brain works a little bit differently than most people's. Additionally, I loved all of the characters in the story. Kai's mom was incredibly sweet. All of Kai's family kind and endearing. And I admit I may have been just a tad smitten by Kai's brother Quan, who was unbelievably sweet and devoted to his brother, and who always went the extra mile to ensure his brother Kai's happiness. And I really hope that the author writes Quan's story next, because I'll snatch that one up in an instant. So, of course, Esme and Kai's characters were both adorable, and it was so much fun to see them grow and evolve as they each move through their own personal journeys. So, yeah, the snappy dialogue, a stellar world building, rich fleshed out characters, and the slow burn romance made this a standout novel for me. And this is coming from someone who's typically not a fan of contemporary romance. Yeah, so I really can't wait to see what the author comes out next. And Helen Huang is one of my new favorite authors. So that is about it for the books that I've read this month. Part 2 of this wrap-up should appear around the beginning of September, fingers crossed. So that about does it. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support. And if you like this video, I'd really appreciate if you click the like button below, as that really helps me out and my channel out. And that about does it. I will talk to you all in the next video. Roger and out. Ooh.